Hey everyone, I'm Kate Kennedy and I'm here with day 62 of 100 Days of Kane, PA. And it's Wednesday, so you know what that means. It means it's History Night here at the Depot, where we hear stories about Kane's history from members of the Kane Historic Preservation Society. I love Wednesday nights, and tonight's story will not disappoint. Tonight, John Marconi is going to share about an industry that was once thriving in Kane, the glass bottle factories. And so he has a lot of interesting things to share and some things for you to look at. And I'm going to go ahead and keep you out of suspense. Flip around here and we're going to go in and get started. So here we are, walking in the depot. Hello, Mr. Marconi. How are you?
Hello, Kate. Hello.
Good to see you.
Nice to see you.
Thank you so much for taking time to be with us tonight.
Sure.
And we're going to talk about the glass factories here in Kane. But before we start with kind of getting into the logistics, why do you think that Kane was a good setting for glass factories to start?
Well, in the mid-1880s, they were drilling for oil in this area, and they found what they call the Kane fields. And in there, they hit huge natural gas wells. At the time, the largest gas wells in the world. And in order to make glass, I mean, it's pretty simple. You need sand, soda, potash, and a large amount of heat. So this gas, at the time, there was not a pipeline system to move the gas to where the glass factories were. They all came here for the gas. And the next thing that this area had was lots of sandstone. So that's where they got the sand by crushing the rocks and grinding them into the sand. So that's why it really flourished. In 1892, B.N. McCoy was the first glass company in Kane. That was located across from the current Country Fair store in the old Kane Handle factory.
Okay, so that was the first one that opened. What type of glass did they manufacture?
Window glass, and it was a process where they would get molten glass at the end of a large pipe or tube and then blow into it, creating a bubble, a glass cylinder. Then they'd let it cool. Then they would cut it in half, and then you still have the curved halves. They would reheat it and flatten it. So there was workers that were glass blowers, there were workers that were cutters, and there were workers their job title was flatteners. So that's where, on a lot of this old glass and the glass that we have in this depot, is you move your head looking through it, you can see the waves, and it's beautiful glass.
So it's the older glass windows in the homes, like the older homes around here and around the country, were made in that factory.
Well, that was one of them. Within the next few years, 1899, the Pennsylvania window glass factory opened. That's behind the current Kane Lumber and Fuel, across from Ron Cook's garage on Pennsylvania Avenue. They employed like 250 people there. Then James City opened up in 1906 with the American Plate Glass Factory. That's a different process where they made large sheets of glass in different thicknesses, but some very thick. And that was the largest plate glass factory in the world at that time. They made huge windows that they shipped to New York City, to Radio City Music Hall. And I have a picture here of a window or a piece of glass that's crated up. It measures 152 inches by 268 inches. So that's over 12 feet high and over 20 feet long.
Wow.
So that would be put on a railroad car and probably shipped to like New York City.
Wow. That's huge.
Okay, here's another picture. This is the Pennsylvania window glass plant. And here it shows the guys at the end of the pipe. You see a bubble of glass. They had blown in there to create that bubble. There it shows them sticking the pole in to get molten glass at the end of it. They would do that first and then blow the cylinder.
Oh, that's interesting. So those were full-time jobs for people.
Well, yeah, and the glass industry paid well and employed a lot of people. Like James City had 500 workers. McCoy was later the American Window Glass Company, where Kane Handle was located, had like 300. The Pennsylvania, 250. Thatcher Milk Bottle Company, that's where Kane Lumber and Fuel is today, had 50. Then there was also the Flint Bottle Company, and then the Kane Window Glass Company. So these factories were all over.
So the first one was in the 1890s.
1892.
And how long did the manufacturing of glass, how long did that industry last?
It was peaking, about 1910 here. They were all doing well until about 1920. And then you had two conditions. You had, the Great Depression was in 1929, but business conditions around the country started falling off starting in 1920. So you had the business conditions declining, and then the supply of natural gas in this area declining. So one by one, the factories closed down. Like Thatcher Milk Bottle closed in 1924, and then like by 1930, they were pretty much gone except James City and Sargent Wire Glass.
Mm-hmm.
James City was owned by local people, mainly the James family. There was a time where they shut the factory down. They couldn't make the payroll. This was in the early 30s. And so the factory was shut down, everybody unemployed. A guy by the name of Durant bought the company. He was associated with General Motors. He was at one time the head of General Motors, but he bought the company and hired all the workers back. So everybody in James City is happy again. They're upset at the Jameses. They changed the name of the town from James City to Durant City. But as a few years go by, Durant ran into the same problems, couldn't make payroll, had to shut the factory down. That's when the people in James City changed the name back to James City.
I had no idea. So there was a period of time it was not known as James City.
No,
but
it was Durant City, and the road, like out of 10 Commandments there, that was, people's address was Durant City Road.
Huh. Well, James City was pretty much built around this factory, right?
Right, yeah. It was the factory that started the town. They were building the factory, and as they were building the factory, they started building houses for the workers. So James City, it just had its centennial in 2006. So it was pretty much founded as a factory was being built in 1906. The workers, there wasn't enough people in James City to work there. A lot came from Kane. They would take the Kane and Elk Railroad to work and home from work. Both of my grandparents came to this area to work at James City. My mother's father was from Czechoslovakia, and my dad's father was from Italy. But my dad's father was already in Buffalo when he heard of the jobs in James City, so that's why they came here.
That's what brought him here. Well, employing 500 people, that is a really big employer. So,
Right.
And there were homes built around the factory as well, right?
Right, that's the town sprung up. It was laid out. I've seen maps of the town that there's numerous streets that never were built that go into the woods. So it was well planned. And
do you have any pictures?
yeah, I have a picture here of an aerial from 1929
Of James City.
of James City that shows all the houses and then the factory.
Okay, so there's a factory. Where is that located, or where was that located?
Okay, Route 66 would be right out here.
Okay.
And then this would be the main road coming into James City today. You went by the factory. Come around here, there's the school, the Catholic Church. This was the black church. There was a lot of black families that worked at the glass plant. It was really interesting. The centennial of 2006, there was a couple of the black families that lived here came back for the reunion, and they brought 2 coaches. They brought about 100 relatives that they all live in Philadelphia now, but they came to the centennial celebration.
That's cool.
But here's the glass mountains. Here's the clay dams where they used to run the water, and then the solids would settle out at this dam and then settle out at this lower dam too. But those were flat, large areas. I mean, like these glass mountains are huge, and there's a lot of area there. A lot of it's grown in now.
Mm-hmm. Do you have any pictures of what it looked like when it was being built?
Yep, here's one in 1906 of the plant just under construction. It was a huge plant, and it burnt down. It was built in 1906, and it burnt to the ground in 1910.
Oh my gosh.
They rebuilt it even bigger and ultra modern for the time in 1910, and it was rebuilt in a period of about 4 months.
Oh wow.
So,
yeah, because it looks big. You can see it in the aerial that you showed of when it was in its heyday there. It's very big compared to the other landmarks.
Right. And here's some glass cutters. There's 2 glass cutters from James City. They're actually little hammers, and they have a diamond here. So you make your score in the glass, and then the hammer would be to tap it to start to crack.
So they have a diamond here at the top.
Diamond at the top to cut, and then the little hammer. This is just a hammer to get the break started.
How interesting.
Here's a picture of a rock crusher. That's where they got the sand. I mean, all the sandstone around Kane. I said if the glass industry was still here, there wouldn't be any rocks in this area.
So we see the picture of what it looked like when it was up and running, and then it closes in the 1930s. How did it end? Like, what is the building today, and how did it end?
Well, after Durant closed it, he sold it to Pittsburgh Plate Glass. They were a competitor of the American Plate Glass in James City. And what Pittsburgh Plate did is they went in, they pulled equipment out of there, and then they dynamited the buildings. They didn't want them to be used by someone else as a glass factory, so they eliminated a competitor there. But they didn't do a good job in dynamiting the buildings. I mean, they ruined them, but growing up as a kid, there was buildings partially standing there, high walls that were leaning. But the site today is owned by Charlie Vaughn. His son Matt and son Bob have new houses built on part of that property by the road. And Bob just built a garage a few years ago, and he actually used an old foundation from one of the glass factory buildings. And I mean, it's huge. It's meant for a big building, but it was still perfectly level and served a purpose. But they've cleaned up the site quite a bit over the last 20 years, with heavy equipment that he owns, and so.
That's cool. So there was the one in town that was making glass through glass blowing. There was the one in James City that did the plate glass that was thicker and larger scaled.
Right. And the other glass plants in Kane were like window glass, where they blew it into cylinders and then flattened it. And then the two bottle companies. But in this display case behind us, we got some unique things. I mean, if you could go way in the back to that milk bottle, that purple milk bottle was made at Thatcher. That's where Kane Lumber and Fuel is today. They made bottles for dairies all over the country. The bottom, there's a few logos they used over the years. TMC, that means Thatcher Manufacturing Company, or Thatcher Manufacturing Company would be stamped on the bottom. But that bottle there, it's purple, and at one time they would put manganese in the glass. That made the glass crystal clear, but then after it was exposed to sunlight over a period of time, it would turn purple. So they quit putting the manganese in there.
That's so interesting.
Here comes a train.
Yeah, the train. I love that sound.
But we have a glass cane in there.
Oh.
Actually, 3 glass canes, and then a glass chain.
Yeah, those are beautiful.
Now, those were items that were made by different glass workers. In their spare time, they would just take the molten glass and blow a cane and twist it.
Be a little more artistic with
Just
their
artistic, yeah.
glass work, yeah.
I mean, people see these and think that, well, that's what they made at the glass factory. No, that's what the guys did. They'd make curtain rods and canes and chains. And that piece of glass by the milk bottle there that's laying down, that is a milk bottle that the glass went into the mold, and then they would shoot air in it to blow it into the bottle. That didn't blow up, so that is just a piece of cullet that came out.
So you have a few more of those, right, that we could look at?
Yeah, this is an unblown milk bottle that I found at work. This is a...
So you can see the shape of it, it just never got blown up.
Right.
And you found that years later after it had closed and
in
it
the
was
ground,
in the ground.
Yeah. This is a piece of glass from James City. You can see it's the edge of a sheet where it was cut. And then this is still rough. It hasn't been polished yet. But they would make the thick plate glass.
That would get shipped to the cities for store windows.
Storefront
or
windows.
like that.
They also made ship portholes out of there. This piece of glass is from the Pennsylvania window glass factory on Pennsylvania Avenue. This is another unblown bottle.
It's amazing
In
that
this-
it's still around.
This here, the depot just acquired this a few weeks ago. It's a piece of brown glass or brown cullet. They would, most of the time, they would take this and remelt it to make new glass. They could do it cheaper because it took less heat to melt this than it did the sand. But this probably came from the Flint Bottle Company, where they'd use the darker, the brown glass. Tim Clear just gave us this just a few weeks ago.
That's so interesting. So the bottle companies, what types of bottles did they make? What were the uses of those?
Well, Thatcher at Kane Lumber was strictly milk bottles. They had another plant in Elmira, New York, and then one in the Midwest. The Kane Flint Bottle Company, they made all different types of bottles. We have, and I don't see it in a case here, but we have the first bottle that was manufactured at the Flint Bottle Company. It's a tiny, like a little medicine bottle, about this big. But they made all different types of bottles. And this is commonly called cullet. That's chunks of glass that the glass companies would reuse, like I said. But James City was listed in Ripley's Believe It or Not one time of the city that had streets paved with glass. Believe it or not. Okay, and it was true because they used this glass cullet instead of gravel. So this was how the roads were built out in James City.
That's so interesting. I had no idea that that was a thing.
There's that little bottle right there.
Oh, there it is. Oh, that is
Tiny
tiny.
bottle. And that note inside of it says first bottle manufacturing at the Kane Flint Bottle Company.
How fascinating. I mean, this was such a huge part of Kane's identity for a really long time.
Right. And it was a main reason how the town grew so rapidly in those early years, because the glass industry employed a lot of people and they paid well. So the people had money to spend at the shops and the restaurants, and so that was in the booming days. But it all started slowing down, starting around 1920.
Yeah, well, this has really been very informative, and I just learned a lot tonight. Is there anything else that you wanted to say or share before we wrap up for the night?
Those pieces there.
Over here?
Yep, those ones with the designs in them, those were manufactured down in Sargent.
Oh.
And we have a couple glass cutters that were from Sargent. They're right there next to that book. Those are a little different than the ones I have in the case. But Sargent was the last glass plant to close in the area.
Awesome. Well, yeah, this is amazing. And I just didn't realize how many people were employed by the glass factories and how wide and far the products were sent. So this is really interesting to learn about. Is there anything else that you wanted to say?
The reason they came here was the gas, and the reason they left was because of the gas.
Yeah.
And now, with the new drilling, the Marcellus shale and the Utica shale, we're hitting large amounts of natural gas again. But this time it goes into pipelines and it's being shipped all over.
Yeah.
But, 100 years ago, they were building the factories here because the gas was here.
Yeah, it's always been a part of what we're able to offer is the gas. Yeah. Awesome. Well, hey, thank you so much for sharing. This was really fascinating. And I'm sure if people have questions after watching this, they can find you and you'll have the answers.
Right. Thanks.
All right. Thank you so much. And thank you guys so much for tuning in today. It is so interesting to learn about why the glass companies were so prominent here and what they made and where they went. And I just really loved learning about the history of the glass factories in and around Kane. Did you guys have any family members or any connection to any of the glass factories here in the past? If you did, we'd love to hear that in the comments. And as always, we would love to hear what you guys want to learn about on Wednesday nights here at the Depot, talking to the Historic Preservation Society. We do have a few Wednesdays left here in the 100 Days of Kane series. I want to make sure we're covering the stories of Kane's history that you want to learn about. So please comment below with those ideas as well. We're trying to hit on all of the ones that have been requested so far, so keep them coming. Thank you so much for tuning in, and we'll see you tomorrow for day 63.